Reduce, reuse, recycle. 3 words that have changed the way in which we live and exist in the world. From trying to reduce the amount of waste we individually generate to reusing and recycling everyday items. Overall awareness around the 3 R's have increased diversion rates, but according to the Environmental Protection Agency, the amount of waste per person per day has remained around 4.4 pounds per person. The question then is, why? Ocean conservation groups, such as Oceana, believe plastic straws and non-recyclables like it are believed to be leading stagnant rates in waste, as well as the main cause behind pounds of plastic in the ocean increasing by the second. Therefore, among all the things we throw away, plastic bags, milk cartons, laundry detergent jugs, and water bottles, a lot of attention has fallen on this, the plastic straw. Are plastic straws the real threat to our landfills and oceans? Stay tuned to find out. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Jamila Muhammad. In this special report, you will get insight into the life of a straw, from our cups here on campus to the landfill, and the harm in recycling them along with other non-recyclable materials. We start this journey by talking with Ohio State's Tony Gilland, the Sustainability Manager, the university's Facilities Operation and Development Department. Gilland talked with us about the Zero Waste Initiative, what recycling and waste looks like at Ohio State, and the detriments behind wish cycling, which is the act of recycling something with the hope or wish that it will be a recyclable or a recyclable material.
A team came together and created strategic university sustainability goals, of which one of those goals is to achieve zero waste by 2025. So it should be mentioned that since about 2004, we've been tracking our waste diversion. That's the material that we do not send to the landfill, as well as what we do send to the landfill. It's a calculation. But that more recently there has been added attention to it with the implementation of our strategic university sustainability goals. We have to find a way to educate those folks on how do they dispose of their materials in the best way possible so that we can achieve our sustainability goal as well as be stewards of the resources that we have. And so that is buying the appropriate infrastructure, which could be the bins, and coming up with the appropriate signage for those bins so that everyone can understand where it goes. And there are several professionals across the campus here in several different departments in order to help us do that. There is a scorecard that tracks our performance in all of our sustainability goals. And that scorecard has recently been approved to go to the Board of Trustees, at which point it would be public and put out annually where folks could see how have we been trending on that. That is at the highest level. At any point, someone can email us at recycle@osu.edu, and we are more than happy to share some of the data that we have. There are plenty of resources for students, but we don't always hone in on exactly just saying, here's the amount of material that we have and what happens to it. We try to focus on just telling you the piece of information that you most need. So honestly, it's somewhat up to the sorter. So the way that this works is we have single stream recycling. So that means you have one bin and anything that's recyclable can go in that bin. And then we transport it from the bin to a recycling facility. But when I say recycling facility, what I actually mean is a facility that then has to sort that material back out. So if you put your can and cardboard and paper in here, they have to then separate it back out, can, cardboard, and paper. And so then those materials, they essentially take the highest bidder. There is about 21,000 tons for fiscal 18. So our most recent data when we did this calculation, about 21,000 tons for the university. And of that, based on our estimates, so we don't have specific data, there are a few thousand of those tons that we say are in the plastics. And so whether or not that's a plastic that does have a market or a plastic that doesn't have a market, again, we're getting more and more into estimates based on just because there's so much material and the way that it's mixed together and having to go back through and find some of that data. Part of it is recycle smart and understand what can and cannot go into the recycling bin, and don't wish cycle. Don't put something in there with the hope that you think it's going to be recycled, because that actually can cause bigger issues, and then more recycling will not be diverted because we had too much wish cycling. So ultimately, you need to kind of have a basic understanding of what are those things that can be recycled, and just make sure that you understand the biggest pieces of it. It would not make a dent, if we removed every straw from campus. That would not really make a noticeable dent in the way that we calculate our diversion rate. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't put effort into looking at that, and that there's other problems with where straws can end up, and just the way that they're made and everything else in between. Yes, those are reasons to continue to look at that item and kind of evaluate whether or not we want that on our campus. But in terms of, we calculate diversion rate based on weight, and they hold no weight. So, and they're not the biggest issue. Again, thinking of the cups as the example, that is a big issue. And if you have any residual liquid in it, and the straw may still be on the cup, that is problematic. And so I doubt that we would do an education campaign without the help of some very passionate students that might be behind it, right? If there's students that want to do an education campaign around straws, great. Mm-hmm. But in terms of how we have to hit the masses, we have limited resources and time to be able to spend on what we're going to try to educate. So we're going to hit those biggest and most important things first, and those most common problems that we see. And then maybe eventually we'll get to a point where we say, well, now that has more importance because it is a bigger part of the stream. Everyone else has done better with everything else. Mm-hmm.
Places like dining halls and cafes at Ohio State are the main facilitators of non-recyclable plastics. Between carry-out containers, coffee stirrers, and plastic straws, there are numerous items that we consume that are not able to be recycled. I spoke with Zia Hamid to discuss the amount of plastic material dining services both purchases and consumes, as well as the intentions dining services will be taking to be more green and contribute to Ohio State's Zero Waste Initiative.
Absolutely. So we're actually serving over 40,000 guests a day, right, on a typical day. So obviously you can tell that we're going through a lot of materials that are recyclable and also biodegradable. I can tell you that our number one purchase to-go ware is actually a biodegradable to-go ware. In some operations, we actually have pulping systems in place. At those operations, we are purchasing biodegradable straws, so they are not plastic straws. But then many operations, we're actually still purchasing your traditional straws and also traditional star sticks. But there are operations where we purchase paper-style star sticks too. So it's a combination of both. So our focus is definitely to be as much divert waste as much possible. We definitely have plans to eventually move to a lot more sustainable model than where we're at right now. And that's a work in progress. We need to work on our systems to make sure that we're just not buying biodegradable items, but we're also putting systems in place that those biodegradable items are going to the right place. So very carefully and methodically, we want to make sure that we're doing things thoughtfully and we're not making radical changes, because oftentimes when you make radical changes, the setbacks can be bad. So we want to make sure we're being very thoughtful as we're making those changes. So one of the great examples would be our My Cup program, where we're giving out every first-year students a reusable cup so they can use for water and other beverages on campus. We're also rolled out a reusable coffee program on campus, so students can purchase a reusable coffee cup that they could continue to use. We have reusable to-go boxes that we offer at our traditions location. Typically, biodegradable products are repurposed for different reasons. For example, some of our biodegradable product gets reused to create energy. Sometimes you can use biodegradable product to put it back in the soil, depending on the type of product that you're using to enhance the soil, right, for farming. Then the recyclable product is typically repurposed to rebuild items such as plastic, right? You can recycle plastic and reuse it to build more plastic materials, right? Whether it's the same material or different materials. So that's really the main difference between biodegradable and recyclable product. Well over 8 years ago, we got rid of all of our plastic bags. So we don't use any plastic bag in any of our operations anymore. We have also gotten rid of any of our trays in all operations in dining services. Again, well over 8 years ago, we haven't been using any trays. And also, many of our operation, like Sloopy's and All Traditions operation, we're using other type of plates that we wash and we reuse. So we're not using any paper product in those operations. I would consider ourselves to be one of the more progressive ones in terms of being sustainable when you're talking about reusable and recyclable product. I would like to believe that not only our reusable cup program is one of the most comprehensive program in the country, just not in Big Ten, but also we're doing as much, if not more, than any other Big Ten colleges.
From Ohio State to Rumpke, Rumpke is not only one of Ohio State's recycling partners, but also a partner with the City of Columbus. They are one of the nation's largest privately owned residential and commercial waste and recycling firms. We spoke to the regional recycling manager, James Horrocks, about the 3 steps of recycling, what makes plastic recyclable versus non-recyclable, how international laws have affected the recycling business, and the positive effects of recycling properly.
Right behind us again is the plant, and it's divided into 3 phases. Phase 1, which is actually all the way down on the west side, is where all the material is brought in from trucks similar to the one that sits right behind me here. This truck collects nothing but recycled material. Again, we call it single stream. They'll tip all the material in the warehouse behind us. That material will then be brought into the middle of our plant, which we call phase 2, through a series of conveyors and incline belts. Once the material gets towards the middle of our plant, all the glass will be removed from it, and that's what you see in this big blue tower. We'll take all that glass bottles, jars, we'll crush it so it comes into little pieces. You can actually hear, if you're listening very carefully, that glass being built up in these silos. When it gets full, we'll put trailers underneath the silo. They'll get loaded up and be taken out to our Dayton processing plant, where we have a specialized facility that cleans that glass up even further. And we're actually one of the few recyclers in the nation. We welcome glass. We believe it's a big part of recycling. What's also occurring in phase 2, the middle of the plant, is we have big disc screens that are running the material over the top. What happens is the fiber, the paper, cardboard, and what we call the 2-dimensional material tends to ride over the top, whereas all the containers, cans, bottles, plastic, falls down in between. By the time the material gets up to phase 3, we have people that actually are looking at it on a conveyor passing in front of them. So whatever the disc screens couldn't get out, those sorters will sort it by hand. Some of the things we sell out of this plant pure is aluminum cans. It's called used beverage containers, or UBC. We sell steel and tin cans. We sell mixed paper. We sell OCC, which is old corrugated cardboard, which is cardboard. We sell 3 different grades of plastic. We sell PET, HDPE, which is a little more rigid, and then rigid plastics itself. And then we also generate a mixed plastic, which, as we said earlier, really doesn't have much value. Most people think that all plastics are recyclable, and to some degree they are. However, we focus on the plastics that really have an end market today, which is PET, which again is mostly your drink bottles, your water bottles, HDPE, which is a type of plastic that is mostly your milk containers, the white milk containers, detergent bottles. Also, we recycle mixed plastics, although there's very, very little value in that. Mixed plastics tends to be pretty much everything else. Rigid plastics, which is mostly your large pieces of children's play equipment or bread trays. Kitty litter now comes in pretty large containers, that type of material. So those are the plastics that we're really trying to mine out of the stream. Unfortunately, a lot of the other leftover plastics, there's just no market for. So we basically are looking at having to take that and either pay to get rid of it or take it to the landfill. From my perspective, is that I think there's larger challenges for us to address before we start to worry about plastic straws. The only real problem with plastic straws is that they're so small, and a big facility like is behind me, our equipment is not necessarily designed to capture material that is as small as a plastic straw. It is a big issue right now, especially around our oceans and waterways, but because we're here in central Ohio, most of the straws that come out of the material are going to be mixed in with the mixed plastics that I said earlier really is of no value, or else they're going to go right to the landfill anyway. And I think that today you see that any release of material or liquid is very highly regulated, and honestly, you will see very, very little landfill material coming back into our rivers, being we're landlocked here. I think most of the focus today is on plastics that are coming from developing countries or from the Pacific Rim, which again, unfortunately, a lot of their collection systems are rivers and stream beds, and they have a level of material in those countries that they don't have nearly the type of facilities that we have to be able to process it. So it just becomes a case of where it's the easiest way to dispose of it. And of course, all those rivers and streams make their way to the ocean. About a year ago, last summer, China advised the World Trade Organization that they were no longer going to accept, as of January 1st, any more recovered mixed plastic or paper into their country. They started to limit the amount of material that was being sent into China. A lot of U.S. recovery facilities, such as this one, were sending a lot of recovered paper and plastic to China at the time. It was the largest end-user market. I can tell you that Rumpke never really sent a lot of material to China because we have good domestic partnerships throughout the United States, a lot right here in the Midwest. Material that can pollute the rest of our good recyclables, such as food waste, organic material, paint, grease, dirty diapers, and then also items that can get in our equipment and jam them up, such as rope, electric extension cords, garden hoses, plastic banding, single-use plastic bags, plastic shrink wrap. All that material can get wrapped around the equipment that we use and actually cause it to stop. So the idea that just one little plastic bag can bring a $30 million plant to a stop, to cease production, is amazing. In terms of our economy and in terms of correct deployment of our resources, is to recycle. It's actually better than finding new sources, new virgin material sources. So I think overall it's well embraced globally. It obviously keeps material out of landfills, which again, there's a finite life to a landfill. Landfills don't last forever. Eventually they have to be capped and another landfill has to be started somewhere else. We actually are deconstructing single stream and reconstructing material across the board in terms of raw materials, as I mentioned earlier. Aluminum, raw plastic, pulp, paper. These are all things that are in significant need. However, as I mentioned, there's a cost associated with that. That cost, unfortunately, continues to rise.
Materials that cannot be recycled wind up in the landfill. These materials would be our plastic and paper cups, takeout containers, food waste, and yes, the plastic straw. While straws have been a growing concern, the dent they make in the landfill is very minor. However, there should always be a push for reusable materials. SWACO's Hannah Grayer-Brown spoke to the amount of recyclable and reusable material that ends up in the landfill.
About 17% of all the waste we receive here at the landfill is considered plastic material. That's about 750 tons of plastic we receive every single day. And to put that into perspective, on average, as a community, we generate over 2 million tons of waste a year. And so individually, that's about 9 pounds per person. And so there's a lot of opportunity to divert more material from the landfill, including our plastic. You know, things like plastic water bottles are easily recyclable. Plastic bags, even though they can't go in the curbside or drop-off container, they can be recycled at your local grocery stores. I think anytime I'm personally faced with a decision about using something that's just a single-use item, I always look for an opportunity to reuse an item or to reduce my waste in the first place. And so if there's an opportunity to not use a plastic straw, maybe use a metal straw or some sort of reusable option, you could always consider that. We track the waste that comes here to the landfill. In fact, we know that we accept over 1 million tons of waste every single year from Franklin County students, residents, and businesses. And surprisingly, 70% of all of that material could have been recycled or diverted. And so SWACO is really focused on helping students at Ohio State University, our residents, our businesses connect with recycling, access to recycling programs, whether through our drop-off program or recycling at the curb. And so we're focused on that and have launched a number of educational campaigns to help get the word out that it's important not just to recycle, but to recycle the right materials. So our Recycle Right campaign recently launched. It's been distributed to about 50,000 households here in Franklin County. And really what it focuses on is providing every single family household with a magnet about what can go in the recycling bin. And so in Franklin County and at the university, items like plastic bottles and jugs, metal cans, our cartons, there are 5 categories of materials that can be recycled. And so we only want those items in the recycling stream. It's really important to recycle right, because when we do that, we make the biggest difference for our environment. Well, I would say to always remember our 3 R's. It's always good to reduce the amount of waste we generate, reuse, and then recycle. And so in lieu of your water bottles, your plastic water bottles, I'd encourage you to consider a reusable water bottle that you wouldn't actually need a recycling location for. However, SWACO continues to work with the university to identify drop-off recycling locations so that students do have access to the recycling containers and can easily take them from their apartment or student housing over to the drop-off container. We have about 55 locations throughout Franklin County. I'd encourage anyone who's interested in locating one to go to swaco.org, and you can easily query our map there and find the location nearest to you.
Recycling, the answer to many environmental and conservation issues that we face today. The life of a straw can be concluded as commonly misunderstood to be a danger to society and recycling initiatives. While I urge one to choose more sustainable options, whether that be declining to use a straw or using a reusable option, reducing, reusing, and recycling properly is the most beneficial way to make for a better tomorrow.